Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Lords of Limited. My name is Ben Warney, and joining me on the line, as always, Mr. Ethan, Dragonstorm Forecaster Sachs. Ethan, we poo-pooed this one in the pre-format previews, and I think this card has legs.
I've liked this card. I came away from early access and I was like, I liked this. And you were like, I haven't had to stoop to this level of card quality
I
yet.
do remember saying that, which is embarrassing because my kingdom for a Dragonstorm orb these days, or a Dragonstorm globe, I guess it's called. I listened to LR this week, and LR and Ham TV, I think, is the first person who was on this, have been calling it the orb.
The orb. Okay. Yeah. Yes. The globe is real. And we saw it piloted to a first place finish by Andrew Beckstrom. And if you've been in the content verse, you know that he dropped in on LSV's channel and they reviewed his draft. He was on LR this week. We're actually going to be reviewing his draft on Lords Unlimited this week because so awesome to get some high stakes limited when there's no PT. So a lot of talk about the globe and fixing and ramp and all that good stuff. And we've got a lot to talk about this week because I haven't really gotten to chat with you or really touch base with the content world very much, other than drafting on my phone this week because I've been on vacation. So I'm excited to talk about this format with you this week.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been playing a lot recently, and not so much during the week, but I had a good 5-6 hour stream yesterday. Watched NBA finals all day, played on my phone after streaming for 5 or 6 hours. So got some drafts under my belt, and I've been watching some content. I feel at peace with where I'm at in the format. But one of the things we were talking about before the show is it's so hard to talk about because there's not tons of consensus. But I feel like even if there's not consensus, I am able to now, or we can, I think, present to the world, here are your options. Like, here are the things you should be thinking about. Here are the considerations for navigating between these options during the draft. And I think overarchingly, one of the hardest parts about this format is in a normal 10 color pair format, or whatever, 10 deck format,
Yeah.
each 2 color pair. In a normal format, if you end up in a color pair, your deck is generally, by the time we understand the format, your deck is generally prescribed to you. Like, you know what your deck is supposed to look like. You know the pieces you're supposed to pick up. You know how the pieces fit together. You know which ones are more important to get into the deck. And then by drafting a color pair, your deck usually just works if you know what the good cards are. And so it's kind of paint by numbers in that sense. And Cons of Tarkir is like,
Not cons. Not cons.
not Cons of Tarkir, excuse
Jar.
me, $1 in the square jar. Yes, Tarkir Dragonstorm is like, you get a canvas and you get a lot of really nice paint, and they say, like, go make some art. And like, you have to make decisions. Like, you have to decide what your deck is going to look like. You have to decide what picture you're going to paint on the canvas. And once I realized that, like, that I had to be the one making the decisions, and the draft wasn't going to do it for me, I started doing a lot better in the format.
That is just such a good way to describe this format. And because I had been feeling that sense with trying to discuss things in the Discord and checking in on what the trophy decks looked like and my own experience. And certainly after hearing what Paul's impression was on coverage of what BK and LSV's testing prep for Denver was like, watching his draft, and then also watching BK and LSV talk about his draft and what their prep was like. And I was like, oh, you can just do that. You can go in and decide what you want to do. Because I had been feeling this sort of, okay, I like, maybe I prefer if we put it in 2 very large buckets of Camp Teamer versus Camp Mardu, as we did last week. I was like, well, I prefer the Teamer life, but I know that the Mardu life is successful. And so I'll like be open to that. And then once I sort of heard them talking, I was like, oh, maybe I don't have to be as much. Maybe I can just sort of do what I'd like to do rather than trying to, air quotes, be open to the draft. And I obviously, we'll talk about a little bit later on, like some things that make me feel like I feel like I have to sort of get forced into doing Mardu. And I will if I am forced and I am aware of what I feel like being forced into it is. But beyond that, I'm just sort of doing what I want to do. And that's why this format is so hard to talk about, is because I'm having success doing that. And I know there's many people out there having success doing their own things. There are still people who are like Mardu or bust in the Discord. And I just don't get it. But to your point, there was even this large conversation in the Discord yesterday where I was like, someone said, I don't understand how people are winning with these aggro decks. And I was like, that's sort of how I feel. Like, I feel like I beat them all the time and I don't enjoy playing them myself. But I don't think I'm building them necessarily or drafting them necessarily the way that some people are. People are like, maybe the word aggro is tripping you up, or like, I haven't been doing the go wide stuff. And then other people are like, I'm only doing the go wide stuff and winning. And so
Yeah, I saw that
it's
conversation.
it's really hard to then be able to give feedback to people who maybe know more about the space that they're carving out in the format than you are. And it's really hard to know, like, okay, well, I think I was supposed to be drafting Mardu, but was that Mardu deck just supposed to be red white? Was it supposed to be red white splash black? Was it supposed to be black white splash red? Was it supposed to be go wide? Should I have put some card draw in there? Should I have had more one drops, more tap lands, less tap lands? Like, there's so many variables to what your decks can look like that it goes way beyond what you're talking about of like the paint by numbers 2-color life that we're used to.
Yeah, and I think ultimately that's your enjoyment level of that. I think it ultimately boils down to your enjoyment level of the format. Like I see all the stuff, and this is a very unique format, but it's not unique particularly in ways that are interesting to me. Like, and I think it boils down to whether you see, like, I see 3 decks in the format and just variations of, like, I'm drawing a picture of a mountain, or I'm drawing a picture of a tiger, or I'm drawing a picture of a forest. Like, and yes, this forest has like some bushes with some flowers down underneath it, but it's still the forest, you know? But some people would say, no, there's like 25 different pictures you're drawing in the format. And I think where you're buying into that is how much you're enjoying the format, because this format has gotten also, I think, pretty polarizing reception as far as how deep and how good it is. But I think all that to be said, got a lot of good advice for you about how to win in the format.
For sure, which is ultimately, I think, what a lot of folks, I mean, they probably come for the number scale first, us arguing about D grade cards second, and then they come for how to win in the format. So we've got that for you, chock full in this episode. So let's do some housekeeping, and then we'll dive into some good actionable advice for Tarkir Dragonstorm. Let's chat about the Patreon. Patreon.com/Lords of Limited is where folks can go to give back to the show. We had a little high stakes action on Arena this week, the Arena Direct. And the Discord, which is what everybody gets access to via the Patreon, is a great place to share your sealed pool, share your glory of winning your collector booster boxes in your sealed events, and also just great for other high stakes events like the Arena Championship qualifiers or the Arena Opens, Mox Opens, Mox Showcase, whatever, all that good stuff. And we've also got access to, at a higher tier, our podcast feed, where you get this episode a day early ad-free, and also our bonus episode of Lords Unlimited. Like I said, this week we'll be diving into BK's full draft review from the top 8 at GP, or Spotlight Series Denver, I should say. So if any or all of that sounds of interest to you, if you want to try a little 7-day free trial over at the Patreon page of that podcast feed, that is all available to you. We want to welcome our new patrons the first week that they join. And this week we're welcoming Ben, Tubby Cat, Adam, Austin, Nell, Christian, Bill, and Andrew. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We really appreciate your support.
Yeah, cannot say thank you enough, especially that Ben out there. We're going strong in the battle of Ben's versus Ethan's.
It's not a battle. It's like a David versus Goliath kind of situation here, in terms of the amount. So I did say that we were going to like dive deep into like multicolor and mana bases this week. And I think that probably one isn't maybe a full episode's worth of content / I just think there's other stuff to talk about, but I did want to talk about this episode because mana bases are so important in this format. Like, just understanding what is worth a splash, what's not worth a splash, how many sources do you need, when does a splash turn into 3 colors, when does 3 colors turn into soup? Like, all of that is tough because I think people see decks and then try and draft those decks and stumble. I think they think it's a 3-color format, and so they should just be playing 3 colors equally, liberally. And there's just a lot of pitfalls that I'm seeing on social media, on streams, and our Discord, certainly, that I think it is worth touching on.
For sure. I think that point that you made is the hardest part about the format, that people see a deck and then they try to draft it. But I think the worst thing you can do in this format is end up in a subpar version of somebody else's deck idea. Like ending up in like tier 2 version of anything is really bad. And it's difficult to know when you're drafting. Like, one of the most critical pieces of this format in my mind is when you start drafting a deck and you have to jump ship, or you decide to jump ship, like knowing when and how to pivot from like, okay, I'm going to do a really big deck into, no, I'm going to do a slightly less bigger deck that's more beatdown focused. Like that, those pivot points are critical, I think, to getting the best card quality you can for your deck. But it's really hard to know how to do it without tons of reps. Like, I think that's when we look at draft logs, what I'm going to try to articulate to folks, or just how to be thinking about that. But navigating steering into a deck properly is really difficult.
There's also a larger piece of the pie than I think I'd like to admit that exists of like, so you can draft whatever, if it's the big two camps of Mardu Teamer, which is obviously extremely limiting
Reductive.
in its
Yes.
scope, right? Reductive. Thank you. But I'm just using that as two large umbrellas here. There is also a sort of third offshoot where you're like, and now I'm drafting a cute deck. But you sort of have to decide to do it, whether it's, oh, I'm drafting blue-white tempo, or I'm drafting red-black sacrifice, or, and does that have a little bit of flavor of the clan that it's a part of? So it's like blue-red tempo, but you have a few white cards, or you're just straight blue-red, or you're trying to do green-black counters. I don't know what it is, but like the things that feel
Never
like...
try to do green-black counters. That's a good plan for the format.
I agree, but some people swear by it. That's what's so hard, is like, you can't deny people's results, their individual experiences of like, you're winning with this thing, like, God bless, but it's not for me personally. But like, that's the thing, is like, you see some stuff in Discord where you're like, this is a trophy deck of whatever, blue-white tempo, blue-red tempo. You're like, how did you get into it? And it's part of it is like, I kind of wanted to. And so I did. And you're like, okay, I'm glad you wanted to. But so like, do I have that want and desire in me when I sit down to draft? And if I don't, I may end up with a suboptimal version, even if that kind of deck is on my radar. So it's just, all of it is I think extremely difficult. And we're going to try and peel back the curtain for some of that difficulty this episode, as we get to pivoting and navigating out of certain styles of decks in the draft. But I just want to touch on mana bases and the pitfalls that I'm seeing frequently enough in Discord that I think it's worth talking about. The first thing that I will say is I think a lot of people's problems come from decks where it's, what I see is like, here's a 44 card deck. What are the cuts? And I'm like, it's easy. You just cut this color because you have like a couple black cards and a couple Mardu cards and some awkward mana base. And if you just cut all that, you will have a pretty good looking red-white deck. Because splashing, certainly in the Mardu space, I think like splashing is just a danger to your mana base in general, or going beyond two colors is a danger to your mana base in general. But like in aggro specifically, it will also trip you up, because what you're trying to do is curve out and beat down and get the game over with quickly. And if you stumble on your mana, you're going to have a really tough time doing that. So that is my first thing, is I just think like reducing the amount of like awkward splashes / understanding what is worth splashing is also really important when you are in the classic sense of two color base with a light splash, whether that's, let's say 3 cards would be, that'd be a heavy splash in a normal format. In Tarkir Dragonstorm, I think that's a light splash. But like knowing what's worth splashing there is also tough, because I see people splashing like black combat tricks, like the Death Touch Indestructible trick, Alesha's Legacy, in a red-white deck. I'm just like, that's an easy thing to cut to start if you're looking for something.
Yes, but then there's the other end of the spectrum too. Like, I think that's good advice for those more focused streamlined decks. But then there's also the other end of the spectrum where you're like 3-color clan or your 5-color Dragonstorm, or and you are supposed to splash.
Yes,
like there's decks where like, yes, your deck's going to be better if you don't splash or limit your splash heavily, and then there's decks where no, you do want to stretch because you're wanting the game to go long, so you need as much power as humanly possible.
Well, and some of those problems are in the draft, I think, are solved in the draft and then can't be solved once you get to deck building, because you're sort of like, well, you've got the power, but you don't have the good mana, or you've got the good mana, but you don't have anything worth splashing for. And so then it comes back to what happened in the draft, where did you just sort of say, oops, all fixing and monuments, and then I didn't get any good cards? Or did you not know which of the good cards you needed to take when? Or, all that stuff it's baked into what makes this format tough. But I did sort of want to describe, I think, some good mana bases that I think I see in the format. And that's like okay, you've got a 2-color deck. Maybe that mana base is like 8 basics, 1 dual land. Like you don't need to be messing around that much with fixing there. I think another one might be a light splash, like 2 colors and a few cards, and then you've got 7/7 of your basics, a couple duals, an evolving wilds, and maybe a monument baked in there. That sort of thing.
Yeah, I think, well, the general rule for splashing is 1 card, 3 sources, 2 cards, you're splashing 4 sources, 3 cards, you're splashing 5 sources, and then past that, you're just 3 colors.
With the caveat of, like, in that sense of a splash, if your splash involves more than 1 basic land, I think it's a problem. Maybe once you're getting into the space of you're splashing 5 cards and your mana is good. Like, then what I mean by your mana is good is like, okay, you've got some duels, you've got 2 evolving wilds, or you've got an evolving wild, you've got 2 monuments. And so a lot of things are doing like triple duty in terms of getting your base 2 colors plus your splash. Then maybe you can afford to run a couple basics of your 3rd color. But usually, like, it's a real, like, 6/6/5 mana bases. That's just bad. Like, I have not run stuff like that unless I've, like, with the real asterisk of like, I've got a bunch of monuments, I've got a bunch of Sagu wildlings, like whatever, that my deck is a lot more about that, about setting up my mana in the early turns. But for decks that aren't focused on that and you're running like 5 basics of your 3rd color, it's a really, really great recipe for a bad deck.
Yeah, completely agree.
And then it's so hard to talk about what more complicated mana bases look like green soup decks where you've got like, you want 9 plus green sources because you're, using your Sagu wildlings and maybe your Enoch Wayfarers or your ways to impact the board early. And then are you running like 1 of every basic and some dual lands and evolving wilds? And do you have devotees in that space? And monuments obviously are in that space. And like, it's kind of a vibes feel thing after that, but I am thinking about a base color, like about consistently casting my spells, which I guess brings me back to the point of like people splashing a bit judiciously of like, think about when cards are going to be impactful. Like something like that Surveyor, the 1 in a black 1/3 flyer rare, when it attacks, you endure 1 and lose a life. That card is great on turn 2. It's a snowbally problem that has to be answered. Card's not great as a splash in your blue-green Sultai deck or your red-white Mardu deck. Like, so just thinking about when, and that's a pretty, I think, straightforward, easy example, but people get tripped up all the time, I think, about like, this is a card that is in the colors I am and is powerful. I'll play it. It's like, yeah, but what is the timing of when it's going to come down? And that all gets baked into these much soupier decks that are likely base green, but are relying on many things to set up your mana on time.
But don't you know that when you play Mardu, you always hit all your colors on curve? At least my opponents do. That's how it works, right?
That is true.
That's baked
Does
into the arena
happen.
hand smoother when you play Mardu in this format.
That's right. That's right. The Mardu devotee is just there for extra rub-ins, but you don't need it. You get the Natty Tron no matter what. So we just had a slight technical difficulty, and so while I was waiting for Ben to send me another link for our call, I opened up Discord and saw someone with a like draft debrief, and I was looking through it, and at the start I was like, you know what people need to do for draft reviews in this format is they need to like say their preferences first. They need to be like
stating pronouns up front.
I think so. Like
I'm a teamer player.
Yes, I do think that that's true because I'm looking at this draft log and the first question I have is, what do you want to do? Because I know what I want to do. And that is going to lead me down a very specific path of like, these are like, I have a tier of cards that I'm going to take because they go in what I prefer to do, which is big late game decks, which are generally green based, but like can be blue control, whatever. And then like more assertive Mardu decks are my off ramp, are the thing where I'm like, if you have to force me into it, I'll do it. And I have a sense of like, these are the red flags I'm looking for where I feel like I'm not getting into the deck I like. And these are the power level of cards that I'll see 5th pick, 6th pick, that'll make me say, do I have to pivot? But those two camps are such at polar ends of the spectrum that what you were talking about before of like knowing when you're jumping ship or when you're pivoting or when you're sort of 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and then deciding, that's also a really important decision to make in this format too. But I do feel like you got to sort of be upfront about, this is what I'm trying to do in the format. Here's my draft log. Because I might just be like, why are you taking this card? I don't like that card. And then people are like, well, I do. And then you're just like, okay, well, I don't know what to say.
Well, right, sure, but I think there are several good points wrapped up in what you just said there. First of all, love the love the declaring what your preference is. But so it sounds like you've been drafting the format primarily one way and are pretty good at drafting it that way. Like you know your pick
Yes.
order, you know your pivot points, you know what pulls you in, you know what you don't see that then drives you out. But I've not been doing that. Like I've bopped around a
Mm-hmm.
lot. Like I've been Mardu, I've been late gaming this week, I've been doing some blue red tempo stuff. And I think the more archetypes you try to add to your repertoire, knowing all that stuff gets compounded. Like you have to know a lot to make the decisions for yourself, and making the decisions incorrectly leads to drafting losing decks. Like when I was losing the first week, I was just drafting wrong. Like I thought I was getting unlucky, and I was getting a little unlucky, but more of it was on me than I realized that first week.
Well, and the reason that I think it makes sense that you're approaching the format the way you are, because it's like how I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna force Ketramos and Vintage Cube every time because that's fun. Also,
Sure.
R.I.P. Ketramos, they're taking it out. I guess it was too busted. But
The really
the
important news that people come to Lords Limited for. Ketramos is no longer in the Vintage Cube, folks. I don't know how we're going to continue the podcast.
it's gonna be tough. We'll have to scour the earth for more content. My point is that like I like to sort of go into something. If I've like got a flavor of the week, I like to go into the draft and do that flavor of the week. And when I the my least favorite drafts, or when I feel the worst, are when I'm like, look, I've been forcing this thing. I gotta like take a step back. I gotta read some signals. I gotta try a new style of deck. And then I see like a monument go pick six. And then I'm like, no, what could have been? I could have just been drafting this soupy nonsense instead of this like streamlined red white deck that I might do well with. I might not. Maybe I'm not drafting it in the right way, whatever. Like, I just feel like I know what I'm doing. It makes sense to me that you're like, no, I actually, whatever signal reading I can do in this format, I want to be able to do. And it sounds like you've been doing that. But it's so like, your sentiment of it gets compounded is so true, because I feel like there's so much with just looking at the drafts the one way that I am, of like, this is what I'm looking for early, this is what I'm looking for to jump ship. There's a lot of decisions just baked into that, and I can't imagine what it would be like if I was also like, and I'm fine to start in any of these 4 different kinds of decks, you know?
Right. It's really tough. So I think that would be a first piece of advice is if you're struggling, pick a thing that you like doing and try to specialize and get that down before, like, try not to bop around between, like, try to figure out the different layers of a deck. Like, I know Sam just did an episode, Sam just did an episode on the 3 different styles of teamer. Like, listen to that Rough Drafts episode and figure out, start to dive into the nuances of one, because I can say, like, I feel very confident saying that I'm a very experienced drafter and deck builder. And I've been making a lot of bad decisions because I've been drafting so many different styles of deck, and because there's so much you have to know to draft each style of deck correctly. One thing I want to touch base with you on while we're in the mana bases deck space, one of our format truths was like start one color and work your way out. How are you approaching drafts these days?
Not. I have like preferences for wanting to start in green and blue, but I have no problem taking blue card into or green card into Jeskai card if I feel like the power is there. I have no problem taking blue card into Mardu Monument. Like I'm just sort of I'm taking things that I think are powerful early and then zeroing in from there.
Yeah, that's what I've been doing lately also, and I think that's probably what you should be doing, is just taking the best card regardless of deck type, whatever, and being aware of like aggro versus not aggro. I think that's a pretty important distinction, and you can bop
Yes.
there if you want to, but then taking the best card out of each pack for a while and then taking stock of like, What do I have? What am I seeing?
Yeah, I think with the caveat of best card for the kind of late game deck that I'm interested in playing, like Mardu Sharpshooter may be the best card in the pack I'm looking at. That's the one in a red 1/3 with reach that when a thing enters, it deals the damage to your opponent. That's probably gonna be the most powerful card in a lot of packs I see it in. But that card is a real decision card for me because that's unlikely to be at its best. Like I could be in a red based late game deck that is certainly interested in a 2-drop 1/3 that gets some chip damage and whatever. But that card is going to excel the most in a red based aggressive deck, which is the deck I am least likely to end up in. So that's like a decision point card for me. So I think with asterisk of knowing the power level of the card in relation to the deck you feel like you're trying to end up in, or the style of deck you're trying to end up in.
Sure. But like for me, I'm still wanting to bop and weave a little bit. Like so I'm fine taking, whatever, Teamer Bellow, I don't know what insert Teamer Nate card name here.
Mammoth
Mammoth
Bellow,
Bellow,
yes.
there we go. Yeah. And then taking Sharpshooter and then figuring out like taking and maybe the next packs I have good aggro cards and I'll follow the Sharpshooter, or maybe the next packs I have good late game cards and I'll follow those.
So much that I feel like this episode is going to be 2 hours long, but so much that I want to ask about just that random example. Okay, so you've got, let's say you take Mammoth Bellow into Sharpshooter. Are
Okay.
you thinking that those two cards are going in the same deck, or are you
No, never.
thinking,
Never.
well, not never? Anything's
Never.
possible.
No. No, 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 no. I'm not putting
Never.
Sharpshooter in a Teamer deck.
Does one have more weight than the other when you have those? I mean,
I
obviously,
think
there's so much
yes,
context.
yes. But I think if you'd asked me that question last week when we recorded, Sharpshooter would have had a lot more weight than the Mammoth Bellow.
Uh-huh.
This week, I feel better about drafting the late game decks. I'm less gun shy about it.
Are either of those cards going to give weight to the next 3 picks, or are you still just going to be, I'm just taking the best cards that I see and then we'll see where those coalesce?
I've been trying pretty hard. My draft strategy has been take the best card, what I think is the best card for the first 5, 6 picks, and then taking stock of like, what does this look like it wants to go towards? And then seeing like pick 7, pick 8, and the beginning of the wheel, what am I seeing? And then trying to let all of that help me decide, okay, this is what I want to do this time, this draft. Like rather
Mm-hmm.
than, and I think I'm defaulting towards a little bit later game decks, but I think certainly fine to still draft red, white, beatdown if it's open. I think it's a very good deck.
Mm-hmm.
But then what I've been enjoying is trying to figure out, do I go full 5-color Dragonstorm, Globe, Dragonstorms, Dragons, or a deck that really wants to compete into the late game, or do I try to curb that and play a little more beatdowny style of green deck, like a little more focused deck that's going to try to get the
Mm-hmm.
game over with sooner?
Okay, that makes sense.
That's where I've been at.
Yeah.
So you've got a thing here about what your mana base should not look like. Do you want to get into that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I sort of touched on it, but just like 5/5/5 in your basics, 5/5/4 or whatever, and then some duels like that. That's just a really bad. Like I have had that so sparingly. I mean, I never have really had 5/5/5. Like maybe I've got 3/3/4 and then 7 dual lands / evolving wilds plus monuments plus Sagu Wildling. Like if you're really just like a 3-color deck, it should never look like a 5/5/5 split. Board affecting plays for 2 mana in more than 2 colors is really bad. So what I mean by like things you want to hit the board on turn 2. Like if you've got some exhales that are 3 different colors of exhales, that's fine because that's removal that can scale with the game. Maybe you double spell later or whatever. But when you want to be playing your whatever, like I said, the Black Surveyor, the Enoch Wayfarer, and the Ice Picker, the blue 1/3, like don't have all 3 of those in your 2-drop slot. That's just gonna be a recipe for, I think, a bad time.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I feel like I have more experience with than you at this point is the Dragonstorm Globe deck, like, and how that
Hmm.
relates to your mana base.
Yeah.
So you've been talking about green decks that do run, like, you're using primarily monuments and duels or tri-lands plus evolving wilds as you're
And
fixing.
and Sagu Wildlings, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so Sagu Wildlings also goes in that Dragonstorm Globe deck. And if you want a deep dive on Dragonstorm Globe, you should listen to LR this week. BK was on. It was an excellent episode. And I think one of the things I've actually struggled with is in the format is I've been behind, which has been a weird thing for me.
Mm.
Like, usually I feel like I'm the one figuring stuff out and can take advantage when I do figure it out for a few days. But like I just started to understand the Dragonstorm Globe deck like right around like listening to LR, watching the GP, that sort of stuff, and putting together, okay, I've been losing to this card. I think there's something here. But then now that LR has talked about it, like Dragonstorm Globes aren't wheeling anymore. So
Yeah.
like then you have to figure out, okay, well maybe I can't be drafting this deck as much as I'd like to, you know? Like so I think the word is out on that. But if you're Dragonstorm Globing, Dragonstorms, Dragons, which is very much a deck in the format, your mana is a little more forgiving there. You don't have to spend as many picks on lands because the globes are 5-color fixtures. So as soon as you find a globe, like basically your whole deck's online because not a lot of the dragons are double color pipped.
Hmm.
And then your dragons are going to be better. And the key to that deck, and again, they outlined it on LR, is you don't have to spend slots on card advantage because your dragon storms, that then when you cast your dragons, you get to pick up the dragon storms. That's your card advantage rolled up into one card there plus the dragon. So the deck is basically, if you've not done it, it's Dragonstorm Globes, Dragons, Exhales, Dragon Storms. And that's the shell there. And your mana base is helped out significantly by the fact that you have Sagu Wildling as a 5-color fixer, Dragonstorm Globe as a 5-color fixer, plus the green ramp card, the tuna green, search up a basic, and then
Hmm.
has Harmonize. Like you don't have to spend as many picks on lands because your cards that you want in your deck are 5-color fixers.
Yeah. And so then you're just like running, you've got your base 2 color and then making sure you've got a basic of every off color in there.
Generally, yeah. If you're running the things that search up basics or an evolving wilds, yeah, usually you have one basic of
Hmm.
every color.
Where are you? So BK had 2 of them in his winning deck. I was on this last week, like after seeing it in Discord, and I've played with Breaching Dragonstorm a fair amount this week. I've been chasing that a little bit because that seems fun. Where are you at on that card? This is the 4 and red enchantment. When it enters, you basically cascade, or I guess discover, because you can put it into your hand. You discover 8. And then when a dragon enters, you can pick up the thing. And so the idea is if you're chock full of dragons, if Breaching Dragonstorm hits a dragon, it basically picks up Breaching Dragonstorm immediately, and you get to rinse repeat, and then all of your dragons effectively have draw card tacked onto them.
I think it's good. It's very deck dependent. Like you have to be pretty
Yeah.
confident that you're going to hit something good reliably because if you whiff, oftentimes you lose. Like the first turn that you do it, especially if you're against aggro or
Yeah.
whatever. But it is very powerful. I would say Dragonstorm power rankings. I would go white 1, blue
Yes.
2, red 3, black 4, green 5.
Okay. That's interesting that Encroaching Dragonstorm is the least important, you think? Just because the deck is already fixing and ramping
Well, you want to go from 3 to 5 with the globe, like more than you want to go from 4 to
to
6.
7.
Like, and
Yeah.
globe's just way better because it's an anthem for all your dragons. And then it, like in the dragons matchup, the person who has the globe wins because your dragons are bigger than your opponents. Like the globe is just way better than the green dragon storm, I think.
Globe is so sick also with Relic, with the token dragons that coming in as a 5/5 flying lifelink.
Well,
Globe's so
but the
good.
problem with the relic is then you have to play cheap. I guess you're just running it as the card you want to crack. Like you're not trying to turn it on as a mana rock.
Well, I should just say I haven't really drafted the full Dragon Globe deck. Like I have had Globe and some dragons, but I'm also like I think Relic is different. Sam's talked about this in Discord as well, but like, and I feel like we gotta maybe either bring him on or just stop talking about him. But but I think that The Relic, you need different things in your deck. Like Relic needs 2-drops so that Relic can actually be used as a ramper. The more 2-drops you have, the worse your Breaching Dragonstorm gets, and so like
Yeah, they're very
they're
different
not
styles of decks. Like Breaching
yes.
Dragonstorm is a very specific card and
Yes.
specifically good in a certain style of deck that has all like. But that's one of the weird things about this format. That's where when I was losing to Dragonstorm Globe the first week, I was like, oh, I'm losing to terrible cards. But the format actually incentivizes you to like do nothing, Dragonstorm Globe, 5-drop dragon into like dragon plus an exhale or whatever. That's actually a very hard thing to beat.
But all the Mardu players out there right now are salivating. You're telling me do nothing, globe, whatever. Like,
well, but if you have like one of the things they're talking about on LR is the globe plus caustic exhale is so good. Like the
yes.
turn that you play globe, if you caustic exhale, the aggro player's done. Like the game's over at that point. Like they just have no chance. So I think you need exhales in there also. But it's not do nothing. It's how I was building my decks wrong initially. Like what I wanted to do was like just play all control cards. Like all counter spells, all removal, all whatever. It's like a little bit of interaction early, stick a Dragonstorm Globe, then start playing must answer threat after must answer threat, while then maybe still being able to sneak in a double spell with one of your exhales or whatever. Whereas my decks were just air, and like people were like, I wanted to interact on the early turns, and you do need to do that with aggro, but unless you're playing to the board also, like it just doesn't work playing a true all control strategy.
Right.
Important question. How do you pronounce DATA?
In my house, we say data. And for the longest time, I thought paying a fortune on my monthly data plan was just normal. That was until I found out about Mint Mobile and their premium wireless plan that starts at just $15 a month.
All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network.
Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all your existing contacts.
Ditch overpriced wireless and get 3 months of premium wireless service from Mint Mobile for $15 a month.
No matter how you say it, don't overpay for it. Shop data plans at mintmobile.com/LOL.
That's mintmobile.com/LOL. Upfront payment of $45 for 3 month 5GB plan required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customer offer for first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details.
All right, let's get into some of these more specific notes because I think we got to get to some draft logs to chat about just picks.
Yeah, okay. So before we dive into draft logs, this is broadly how I've been drafting the format. Sounds like you've been honing in on one of these, but probably still maybe a similar-ish thing. I'm curious to see how this rings to you.
Mm-hmm.
But rather than trying to read colors or read clan signals, I've been trying to read signals as what style of deck your best cards want to go in. So aggro, and I would say that one is a little more specific, like base red white almost always for me, or base, I guess, can be base white red, or base red plus another color to support your red aggro.
Mm-hmm.
What I would call beatdown, which is green base usually, although red could be the base as well, but that being like slightly chunkier creatures that you're trying to kill your opponent with. Red white aggro being more flood the board, go wide, that style of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Ramp, which would be Dragon, Storm, Globe, Dragons as the default, but they're like truly trying to skip parts of your curve to the later game. And then what I would call control, which is usually base blue that can also sort of playing to the late game, but trying to hit land drops naturally as opposed to ramping to the late game.
Yeah, we got into like I was kept referring to the deck as ramp and Lords Unlimited last week. You sort of pressed me about that, and I was like, when I'm saying ramp, I do just sort of mean like hit your land drops. Like I'm thinking of Monuments and Enoch Wayfarers as like I know they're not ramping me, but they're ensuring that I'm going to hit my land drops, which is really important for I think all the decks, but I think that certainly the control decks as well, which is I think is a slightly different take on the dragon ramp decks that want to go from 3 to 5 that are really interested in globe. And I think, what is it? Roamer's Routine is the 2 and a green harmonized ramper.
That's a tier 2, but you'll play that if you have to.
For sure.
So after I determine like aggro, beatdown, ramp, control, which of those 4 I think I'm likely to be between and maybe how to bop between them, Then I'm trying to dial down into, okay, I've got a lot of control cards. It looks like maybe base Jeskai will work the best. Or, okay, I've got a lot of aggro cards. I'm probably going to be red-white. Or I've got a lot of good red cards. Let me figure out if I'm going to be red-white or red-blue tempo when I'm trying to be aggressive here. But trying to go macro style of deck into colors clan secondarily. And then once I dial down onto this, it looks like where I want to be, trying to focus more in on that rather than starting with color clans and figuring out the style secondarily.
Yes, I agree with that.
Because normally the if you figure out the colors, the style gets figured out for you in a normal format. But that's just not the case here. And I think that's where I was getting tripped up the most.
Yeah.
I think the second thing that's changed for me most this week from last week is I was really scared of drafting ramp decks or late game decks, whatever you want to call them. Late game decks, because people kept having better finishers than me. But I finally decided that's totally out of my control, whether they have better finishers than me or not. Like, I've had a renewed focus on what is the best style of deck I can draft in my seat, and focusing on what I can control has been really helpful. Like, so if I draft a good late game deck and I've got my couple bombs and my opponent finds their bombs before I do, or they have better bombs than I do, come what may. But I have been winning a lot more with late game decks once I've just been trying to draft right. Like, because that's such a big part of the format. Like, I think being Camp Mardu only or Camp Teamer only, like, I think if you're really trying to master the format, you should want to do it all. But like we said early on in the episode, that takes a lot of deep format knowledge to make the decisions correctly, and making the decisions incorrectly can really trip you up. So if you're having trouble, maybe narrow in on one.
It also, I think it takes a deep knowledge of the format, and it also takes discipline. Because that's the thing that trips me up, is that I have a strong desire for something, and when I ignore that desire and when I try to approach things, I get in this spot where I'm like focusing on the things I'm passing. I'm like, oh, I could have just drafted that or whatever, and then that's why I've been focusing on. I have a plan A, and then I know the things that let me off ramp from plan A if I have to. Like, one of the things that I do, I feel like the most, is when I go down the route of drafting a late game deck in the blue green base space, and then not seeing the power. And then I'm like, okay, well, then I'll just build my deck with Champions of Dusons and Sagu Pummelers, and just think of it as I've sort of backdoor into green based beatdown, and whether that has, but like, you have to know that takes, again, a sense of like, you're just not seeing the good stuff, but your curve is pretty darn good. So maybe stop worrying about getting fixing and late game stuff and just focus on, now I want some piercing exhales so I can double spell and remove things with my chonkers and whatever. But like, it just underlines Ben's point about it takes a deep format knowledge to know how to do all that.
I think the other thing I want to put out into the world, just because I've been losing a fair amount, more than my fair share, and I do feel comfortable, and I've been winning a lot too recently. I listened to LR, like the Dragonstorm Globe deck, for example, and I was like, oh, great, I understand this. And they make it sound so easy, which they should. They're content creators, podcasters. And they're like, yeah, just draft for the late game and draft the dragons and draft the Dragonstorms and draft the Globes and you win. But like, in the draft, like, you still have to make really hard decisions. And then I drafted the deck, and like, other people are doing this also and have good versions of the decks. Like, it's hard to win in this format. Like, it takes a lot. One of the other things to think about, I think one of the best places you can gain equity if you like playing the late game decks is knowing the line. Like, if you're Camp Teamer, to be reductive, but let's say you're Camp Teamer, knowing the line between, okay, I'm really going to go for the late game, or I'm not quite seeing the goods, I'm going to try to play green beatdown. Like, that pivot point, like, is where you can pick up a lot of win percentage, I think, in the format.
I agree. And it's where a lot of those, I think, maybe more narrow decks come into play as well, where you're like, I'm trying to draft this thing, it's not quite open, or I'm not quite seeing all the pieces for it. Ooh, but I could draft just blue-white tempo, or I could just draft green-red beats. Like, those, they're not only pivot points into a different of these four camps, but they also might be pivot points into more niche decks that the format has to offer as well.
Yeah. So I talked about this a bit, but like, for me, first 6 picks or so, I'm just taking the best card, then taking stock of where I'm at as far as like aggro, control, beatdown, which of those I think I can steer most towards, and then taking like pick 7, 8, 9, 10 as pretty signaling. And one of the other things that I think you can get yourself in trouble is like picks 5 through 8 or whatever, seeing a late clan card and taking it and thinking, well, clan X is open because I saw
Mm,
this good late clan card. That's just not true in this format. I don't think.
yeah.
I think you need a lot of data points before you start truly thinking, okay, this thing is open.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Another thing that's really shifted for me is powerful cards ahead of lands. Like I've way shoved lands down in my pick order because all those soupy decks have cards like Dragonstorm Globe. They have Roamer's Routine. They have Sagu Wildling that are 5-color fixtures that you want to play, and then you still end up with some lands. If you're truly playing 4 or 5-color soup, any land is good for you, and you're going to end up with some land. So just shoving those way down in my pick order has been helpful as well.
I agree. It feels similar to how we approached the modal double-faced cards in Zendikar Rising, where we were like, oh, these are so powerful, let's just take them and then figure out what comes. And then by the end of it, we were like, no, you want to figure out what deck you're in and then end up with like 2 to 3 modal double-faced cards in your deck.
Well, that's the other thing. If you actually do figure out something that is open, like if you do manage to read the signals, and the signals are very muddy, if you end up in the open archetype, a lot of times you get the lands for your archetype
Right.
as well later because there's not as much competition for those specific duels.
For sure.
Okay, so quick hits. And we kind of did this last week, but just to reiterate, for aggro, specifically red white, low curve, go wide. You want ways to push damage in chunks. Cards like Frontline Rush, which is the red white, +X equal number of creatures you control. Cards like War Effort are key there. That's the enchantment that poops out a 2/1 attacker whenever you attack and gives all your creatures +1/+0. Shocking Sharpshooter, Zergo's Vanguard. Like you should be able to, I think, check 17 lands and see what the good red cards are aggro wise, I would assume, and that will point you in the right direction.
So just 2 things. One is a little anecdote. I had a cool Jeskai mid-range deck the other day that had 3 Jeskai monuments in it and War Effort. War Effort with Jeskai Monument is a hell of a drug. Getting them to be 2 2/1 flyers that then create a 2/1 attacker when they chunk in, that was a way to win many games of Magic. And 2, this is how I am thinking about red-white aggro as well in the format. But talking to people in our Discord, that is not the consensus. There is like a whole other world of Mardu out there where people are not worried about going wide. But that's how I think about it. I think about it as going wide and taking advantage of the various ways to go wide. You shouted out Frontline Russ, the Sharpshooter, War Effort, like, but what's this other version that people are doing? Is it just
I
more
think the other version
mid-range,
is more
beatdown?
Mardu. Like when you're Mardu, you're just playing better cards, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. But I
Okay.
don't like that because the mana is often worse.
Well, I think that's a beatdown deck, right? That's more of a mid-range beatdown deck. Like I think about those are my favorite Mardu decks are the ones where I'm like, oh, do I get to run like 2 Mardu monuments and an Evolving Wilds? And like I'm not that worried about curving out on turn 2 as I am about getting
Just
to
playing
my
great
really...
Mardu card quality.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So beatdown, great off ramp if ramp isn't open. Threats, removal, like this is a classic limited resources cabs style deck. You want stuff like Inspirited Vanguard is good here. That's the 5-drop 3/2 that comes in and either gets 2+1/+1 counters or makes a 2/2 and then does that every time it attacks as well. Synchronized Charge, Champion of Doosan, like that's the green heavy hitters tricks removal and trying to get the game over with that way.
Just to
Ramp,
let folks know, cabs is cards that affect the board state if you're not entrenched like
if you're
we
not
are.
in tune with limited resources, yeah, you should be if you're listening to our podcast.
For sure.
But if you're listening to our podcast and you somehow haven't found limited resources, it's very good. Go check it out. Ramp stuff, Dragonstorm Globe. We've talked about this a bunch. Basically, you want Dragonstorm Globe, dragons, Dragonstorms, and exhales. Teaming Dragonstorm is really key to not die against aggro. Like I think being able to play that, get the ground blockers to chump, and then kill them with dragons in the air.
That's the 3 and a white. The 3 and a white.
3 and a white
enchantment
Dragonstorm. Yeah, that makes 2/2/2s. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You basically want to get to the point where you can double spell with a dragon plus an exhale. And once you make it there, you're on easy street.
Nice.
And then control, I think I've shifted for me mentally, and I really want the truly excellent rares and mythics before I'm willing to start thinking, okay, I'm trying to take control of the game. So I think at uncommons, Twin Maw Stormbrood and Bewildering Blizzard are probably two of the best uncommons. Twin Maw Stormbrew is the red-white Stormbrew that's the removal spell and the dragon that gains you 5. Bewildering Blizzard is the draw 3, -3/-0 to their team. Rares that you want stuff like Meringue River Regent, Elspeth, Jeskai Revelation, Death Begets Life, Ugin. Like you want the premium rares and mythics, I think, before you're trying to draft this style of deck.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to be pretty confident that you are going to have the best late game.
I think this kind of deck, even though I like it a lot, is the smallest wedge of these four. Like whatever the pie is, like I think ramp and aggro are the two biggest sections of the pie, and then beatdown as an offshoot of, it's really an offshoot of ramp and aggro can be, like when you're like, I'm trying to draft aggro and then I'm getting the good clan cards and my mana's good, I can move into mid-range. Ramp, I'm not seeing quite all the pieces that I want or the good top end, let me offshoot into beatdown. And then I think control, I think you're right, like this kind of deck where it's like you're taking hold of the late game with one of these really powerful bombs, that kind of deck I think comes up the least often of these four.
Yep. And I think if we're talking colors, if you're struggling, I would stay away from black and I would stay away from Abzan. I think that is just like a recipe for getting into no man's land. It's not particularly good at anything. It's not good at being aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
It's not good at, doesn't have tons of great cards. And it definitely doesn't win the late game against the Dragonstorm's decks. Like you just have a lot of auto losses as far as matchups go. I think the most equity to be gained is really understanding teamer ramp versus teamer beatdown. I think that's a really good place if you're struggling to try to hone in your format knowledge.
For sure.
Okay, so let's take a look at some drafts. Put all this theorizing into practice. Okay, pack one, pick one. We just said we shoved lands down in your pick order, but I kind of think a land is the pick here. So there's Swiftwater Cliffs. There's a blue-red land. There's Stormshriek Feral as the red common dragon, the 3/3 flying haste, and then you can omen to Tormenting Voice.
Where are you at on this card?
I like it.
I have just found that I cast the omen so infrequently because, like, I'm not flood. Like, I feel like that's flood insurance, and I'm not flooding. And then if I'm flooding, don't I just want to play a 5-mana dragon instead?
Well, but it can also help you find lands if you need to find lands. But I agree. You're casting the dragon more than you are the omen. But if you have Dragonstorm Globe, this is Volcanic Dragon, baby. Like
that's true.
It's really good with Dragonstorm Globe.
I haven't globed enough to like I don't see that split that you see where you're like, but sometimes it's a 4-mana 4/4, you know.
Yeah.
Okay.
But Globers beware. Like that deck's pretty hotly contested right now after drafting all day yesterday. Okay. So there's that. There's Ice Ridge Serpent, 4 and a blue for the 3/3 bounce a thing. This card's fine. Like you're never picking any of these things. Pack one, pick one though. There's Opulent Palace, the Sultai tap land. And then a couple rares. There's Zurgo Thunder's Decree, which is Mardu for a 2/4. Mobilize 2. During your end step, warrior tokens you control have this token can't be sacrificed. And Yathan Road Watcher, 1 and Abzan for a 3/3. When it enters, if you cast it, mill 4. When you do, return target creature card mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield.
Yeah, I would take Opulent Palace here. I know we did just say we're putting lands down in the pick order, but like this is a pretty weak pack in terms of like raw power that isn't super narrow. And like, yeah, Zurgo and Yathan Road Watcher, I think Zurgo more so, are good cards, but they're just so narrow. It's that outside in thing that we talked about a few weeks ago that I'm still not really interested in doing for a card like Zurgo.
That's the thing. Like, and some people are going to say, well, Zurgo's nuts. You should take Zurdo. But that's probably can't Mardu, like hard can't Mardu people. And I'm just not there anymore. If this were Frontline Rush, I would take Frontline Rush. If this were Shocking Sharpshooter, I'd take Shocking Sharpshooter. If it were any of the good, if it were War Effort, I would take War Effort over Opulent Palace. A 3-color card in Zurgo, I'm less interested in. That was what I wanted to pose to you. What do you feel about Sibsig Appraiser versus Opulent Palace?
Appraiser.
That's what I would take also. Like that, just to try to illustrate where the tri lands are in the pick order. I would take Appraiser, pack one, pick one over Opulent Palace also. Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, so we take Opulent Palace, though, because it's a pretty weak pack. Pack one, pick two. Again, pretty weak pack. There's Rugged Highlands, red-green tap land. There's Unending Whisper, blue for the sorcery draw card with Harmonize, 5 and a blue. There's Osseous Exhale, 1 and a white for the instant, deal 5 to target attacking or blocking creature. If you behold a dragon, you gain 2. There's a Skirmish Rhino, that's the Abzan, 3/4. and drains 2, gains 2 when it enters. There's Venerated Stormsinger, 3 and a black, 3/3 mobilize 1. Whenever it or another creature dies, each opponent loses a life, you gain a life. There's Descendant of Storms, the white 1-drop, 2/1. Whenever it attacks, you can pay 1 and a white, it endures 1. But again, not great options here.
No, this is really tough. Like I don't know what I would take, and I'm sure that what I would take would be different based on the day, based on the time of day, based on if I have like how many drafts I have. Like I can make a case for, I don't know, 5 cards here. I feel like it does feel like old cube in that sense. I think today I would take Venerated Stormsinger because I have really liked that card in some mid-range decks. But I could see taking Osseous Exhale. I could see taking Sultai Devotee. I could see taking the land. Like, I think it's dealer's choice here.
Yeah, I don't like Venerated Stormsinger because it's black. I'm really off black at this point, I think.
That's fair.
Certainly early. Fair. But so I ended up on Rugged Highlands here. As again, this is weird because we're saying shoving lands down, but just to show you how rough these packs are. But you're going to have packs like this. Like some of the packs are true stinkers in this format. So pack 1, pick 3. You got these 2 lands. You've got Opulent Palace and Rugged Highlands, and you have an interesting choice here. I think there's Evolving Wilds. There's Temur Tawnyback, which is a card I've liked quite a bit. I think this does a really good job bridging the ramp, control, beatdown life. If you are base Temur. So that's the Temur 2-brid common, 4/3. When it enters, draw a card, discard a card. You're not picking it here. There's a Dragon's Prey, 2 and a black, instant, destroy target creature, costs 2 more to cast if it targets a dragon. There's Sibsig Appraiser, the 2 and a blue 2/1. ETBs, look at the top 2, put 1 of them in your hand, 1 of them in your graveyard. And then Temur Monument as well, 2 mana for the artifact. Search up a Temur land, and then you can crack it to make a 5/5 elephant for 6 mana. And there's also War Effort, 3 and a red enchantment. Creatures you control get +1/+0. Whenever you attack, make a 1/1 red warrior that's tapped and attacking that you have to sacrifice at the beginning of the next end step.
I would take Sibsig Appraiser here. I think for me, it's between Appraiser and Monument, and I think I have Appraiser ahead of the Monuments. I think War Effort's very good and a key piece for the aggro decks, as far as I see them, but I don't want to do that. Like, if there's just too many things that I could take here over that for the style of deck that I want, that I'm just going to do that versus taking War Effort and then deciding, is that the path I'm going down or not?
I agree. I would also take Sibsig Appraiser here. My reasoning is we've got these 2 lands that are going to be better in a late game deck. Like if you take War Effort here, you're essentially throwing away your first two picks.
Yes.
If this were pack 1, pick 1, it sounds like you would still take Sibsig Appraiser over War Effort. Is that true?
That is true. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I also would, but it's very close. And I certainly would not, if somebody likes drafting red or red aggro, would not fault anyone for taking War Effort pack 1, pick 1. But I think the fact that you have the lands tips you towards Sibsig Appraiser here.
I agree.
All right. So that's just things to think about there for a draft. I want to drop in on this next one 6 picks in. And just assume that we've done the right thing for the first 6 picks, because that's kind of what we were talking about as far as the draft strategy, where you take the best card for the first 6 picks, take stock of where you're at, and then kind of figure it out from there. So let's assume that we did this right. Pack 1, pick 1. You took Perenation, which is the Abzan Mythic. Return a permanent card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a hexproof and an indestructible counter on it. Pick 2. You took Sibsig Appraiser, 2 and a blue for the 2/1. ETBs, look at the top 2, choose 1, put it in your hand. Pick 3, you took Sagu Wildling, which is the green omen, search up a land, or the 3/3 flyer that gains you 3 life. Pick 4, you took a Teeming Dragonstorm. That's the white Dragonstorm that makes 2 2/2s. Pick 5, you nabbed up a Jeskai Shrinekeeper, which is 2 and Jeskai for the 3/3 flying haste. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you gain a life and draw a card. And then pick 6, you took Durgar Island Dragon, which is 5 and a blue for a 4/4 flying with Ward 2, and the Omen taps a creature and draws you a card.
Okay. Get the pot on. I hope you're around all day.
That's the pile.
Yeah. Get a pot on the stove because we're simmering some soup here.
Yeah, I think you've got this is a start towards dragons, right?
Dragons, yeah.
But specifically what flavor? So if we take stock of this, you've got your 3 dragons, you've got the Wildling, the Shrinekeeper, the Durgar Island Dragon. the Teeming Dragonstorm and the Sibsig Appraiser. What are your thoughts with this collection of cards? And you've got the Paranation as well.
I am thinking I'm likely to be blue-green base with the cards like Sagu Wildling to help me with my mana. Sibsig Appraiser also sort of helps me hit land drops. Like, want to make these are the cards that I want to make sure I can cast on curve. So thinking blue-green base and looking for the recipe of the deck you've outlined with ramp of like, I want globes, I want some monuments to hit land drops or Inoc Wayfarers, whatever, and I want dragons and dragon storms and exhales.
Yeah, I agree. Like, your kingdom for a globe at this point in the
For
draft,
sure.
and you're thinking dragons. I agree. You're probably thinking base blue green. All of a sudden, pack one, pick 7. See the following cards. There's no good green. There's a Crotic Nest Guard. That's the only green card. That's the 4/4 with Defender. And then you see a pack with Monastery Messenger, Teamer Devotee, Riverwalk Technique. That's the instant that can top or bottom a creature and counter a non-target creature spell. And then there's also a Runescale Stormbrood, the blue-red Omen Dragon, which counters a spell mana value 2 or less, and then pumps itself when you cast non-creatures and dragons.
Yeah, I mean, this is a weak pack. I don't think it matters. Like, this is a weak pack, and I think Roomscale Stormbrood fits the plan that we just described. Like, it's a dragon, and it's a blue 2-drop for you. Like, if you're on the play, you can just hold that up and counter whatever they're doing on turn 2 if you don't have anything else to do. And if they don't do anything, it's not that bad, because then you can cast the Stormbrood on turn 4.
I agree. I think taking this here tilts you slightly less likely to being base green. Like, this, once I add this to my pile, I'm looking a little more, well, I could just be Jeskai Dragons. Like, I could abandon, you also have the
Yes,
option of abandoning Wildling and Paranation, I think, once you take
that's
this
also
card.
true. Sure. Yeah, I think that's
So I
fair.
think, like, that's what I mean by, like, taking your first 6 picks and then trying to dial in. I think this draft really illustrates that well on pick 7, pick 8. So again, pack 1, pick 8, there's literally no green cards in the pack.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the odds that we're a green base move down quite a bit. And then you see some Jeskai cards. You see a Riverwalk Technique. You see Rebellious Strike. Not that that's a signal, but there is a signal here in Equilibrium Adept. I think that card still being here, 3 in a red, 2/4. When it enters, look at the top card of your library. Until the end of next turn, you can play that card. Like, that's not nothing. It's a nice card to pick up
No,
here.
I think that's a really good card. Yeah, I'm happy with that. And I agree. Now I would be shifting to being blue-red as my base.
Yeah, and so then you wheel like a Focus the Mind, you wheel a Monastery Mentor, an Iridescent Tiger, another Focus the Mind, and another
Yeah.
Monastery Messenger. So it's pretty clear, like, okay, once I get to pick 7, 8 in the wheel, I start to see, oh, I'm supposed to abandon ship on green and head towards Jeskai Dragons. And not that you can't pivot back. And I do end up pivoting back because pack 2, pick 1, I open Eshki Dragonclaw, which is a great rare. It's 1 in Teamer for a 4/4 Vigilance Trample 4/1. End up getting a Ureni also. So we shift back towards black green, but being willing to do that dance of, like, after every pick, taking stock of where you're at is, I think, really important in this format.
Yes.
All right, another draft here. Pack 1, pick 1. See the following cards as options. I don't think any commons in consideration. Maybe a Dispelling Exhale. That's the 1 on a blue, counter something unless its controller pays 2. If you behold a dragon, they have to pay 4 instead. There's Disruptive Stormbrood, the black-green Omen Dragon at uncommon that can blow up a creature power 3 or less, and it's a 3/3 that blows up an artifact or an enchantment if you cast the dragon. There's also Dulkovan Pack Beast, 2 and white for the 0/4 Vigilance, mobilize 3, and then your rare is Teamer Battlecrier, which is Teamer for a 4/3 and makes your spells 1 cheaper for each creature you control power 4 or greater.
Yeah, I love Disruptive Stormbrood here. Most flexible, powerful card in the pack, I
That's
think.
that's what I took as well. Moving on to pack 1, pick 2, there's some good cards, but not for a Disruptive Stormbrood deck. There's a Frontline Rush. That's the red-white pump, equal to the number of creatures you control, or make 2 goblins. There's also a Shocking Sharpshooter, 1 in a red for a 1/3 reach, and whenever a creature enters, it deals damage to an opponent. The best card to go with Disruptive Stormbrood is probably Sultai Monument, the artifact that searches up a swamp, forest, or island, and then you can crack it for 2/2/2s.
Yeah, I think this is where we'll see my real preferences enacted, is that I would take Sultai Monument here as a follow-up to the Stormbrood. Like, I recognize the Frontline Rush and Sharpshooter are better cards, but I think Stormbrood and Monument are also great cards in a deck that I'm much happier and much more likely to end up in.
Yeah, that's fair. I think you're taking a hit in power level in this pick to do that,
I
right?
agree.
Like you're
I agree.
like by passing this, you're saying I'm not going to draft aggro this draft, or it's got to be slapping me in the face
It's
before
got
I'm
to be
going to
slapping
draft
me in the
aggro.
face. Yeah, that's how I feel because I know that I don't have. This is what I feel like I was trying to say earlier, but maybe I didn't articulate. But I know that if I take, what do I don't even know what I think between these two. Maybe I would take sharpshooter because it's monocolored, but like I don't know what's better. But let's say I do have a strong feeling sharpshooter's better. I just know I'm going to spend the rest of the draft. If I'm faced with a close decision, then I'm going to bias towards the disruptive Stormbrood anyway. So I'm just trying to reduce the amount of putting myself in that position. And I don't think I have to put myself in that position yet. Does that
That's
make
fair.
sense? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I like bopping around between. Like I
Yeah.
think, yeah, my strategy is what I said it is. I think I'm going to take the best card out of the
Mm-hmm.
first 6 or so picks, and to me, that's shocking sharpshooter here. Pack 1, pick 2. I don't want to close off aggro as an avenue, and I think there's also a chance you wheel frontline rush in best of one. Like if people just don't know what they're doing, or you've got a bunch of
Sure.
people who are forcing. I mean, in a normal draft, there's no chance it wheels, but
I don't know. You got a bunch
maybe
of crazy Ethans who don't want to draft Boros,
that's true. Pack 1, pick 3. So you've got a sharpshooter and a stormbreed. Let's just go forward with my route because I think that's the easiest
Sure.
to follow along with. There's Jeskai Devotee. 1 in a red for a 2/2. When you cast your second spell, it gets +1/+1, and it filters for Jeskai mana. There's Abzan Devotee. 1 in a black for the 2/1 that filters for Abzan, and you can rebuy it from your graveyard for 2 in a black. There's Salt Road Pack Beast. 5 in a white for the 4/3, and when it enters, you draw a card. It costs 1 less to cast for each creature you control. And then there's in the rare slot, Dragonologist, 2 in a blue for the 1/3. When it enters, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You can reveal an instant, sorcery, or dragon from among them and put it into your hand. Untapped dragons you control have hexproof.
Yeah, I think you're. So what are the two best cards for the two camps? I guess it's Salt Road Pack Beast pairs the best with Shocking Sharpshooter, and Dragonologist pairs the best with Disruptive Stormbrood.
Yeah, I think that's true.
I mean, I feel like you kind of. I don't know. I don't know what I feel like. I want to take Dragonologist again, like, but that's just my bias, Like, and
I
certainly
also
if
want
I.
to take Dragonologist here today. Like this is a draft from, I don't know, 4 or 5 days ago. And I took Pack Beast. I think today I would take Dragonologist.
And why? Can you talk about why? Like, what's changed, or what are your feelings about these picks? Or
I think Dragonologist goes very well with Disruptive Stormbrood. If I were pairing an aggro card with Shocking Sharpshooter, I'd rather it be a red card. Like personally for me, when I like drafting aggressive decks or the like blue-red tempo decks, I really like the base red aggro
mm,
cards more than I like the base white aggro cards. Because I think if you get the red aggro cards, there's a lot more opportunity to do cool things. Like, yes, you can do standard stock red white, but there's also really cool red blue tempo deck. In my head, I can see a red black aggro beatdown deck that I haven't had a chance to draft yet. And I know there's red green beatdown. So I think I'd rather pair a red card with it. And I don't think I had quite gotten on that wavelength yet when I was doing this draft. So I think,
mhm.
and I have more of an appreciation for Globe Dragons now than when I was doing this draft initially.
Makes sense.
So I think I would also take Dragonologist here, pack 1, pick 3. And then pack 1, pick 4. There's really nothing to write home about. There's an Inoc Wayfarer, which is 1 in a green for the 1/1. When it ETBs, you mill 3 and can put a land into your hand, or it gets a +1/+1 counter if you don't. There's a Dispelling Exhale as well. 1 in a blue, you can counter target spell as controller pays 2. If you got the dragon, they have to pay 4.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just take Wayfarer here to shout out that the Boros options are slim. There's Wild Ride, +3/+0, Harmonized card, Lightfoot Technique, the +1/+1 counter, Indestructible Trick, and Reverberating Summons. I did play with this card this week for the first time. The 1 on a red enchantment at the beginning of each combat. If you've cast 2 or more spells this turn, this enchantment becomes a 3/3 monk with haste in addition to its other types until end of turn, and then you can pay 1 in a red, discard your hand, sack this to draw 2 cards. I had a weird draft where like was trying to do the green thing, ended up doing a green red beatdown deck, but basically just off the back of a few Champion of Doosan, and then had so many just like kind of garbo red cards late that I was like, I think I get more power out of being mono red, and so I had like 2 reverberating summons, a bunch of the 2 mana 2/1s with haste, with flurry, deal a damage, 2 of the rare red 1-drop mobilized creatures that can then sack to deal damage equal to the number of creatures you control.
That sounds awesome. So was the deck amazing?
It was fine.
Or
It went
no?
2-1. It went 2-1 in best
No.
of 3. I don't know. It was a rare unicorn of a monocolored deck in Tarkir Dragonstorm. But like, yeah, it was something. It didn't feel very powerful, I guess, is my ultimate feeling. Like, it ran some people over. It did some nasty things. Wild Ride is a card that has impressed me in those when my drafts feel like they're going poorly or they're underpowered and I can touch red. I feel like Wild Ride scoops up a lot of equity for me. Card just like kind of wins games out of nowhere and does make your opponent like it just sitting there in the graveyard is like it's kind of scary.
Yeah.
I don't know. So yeah, I would take Enoch Wayfarer here, I think, just because it again pairs the best with Disruptive Stormbrood. But
I think if you took Dragonologist, I think Dispelling Exhale gets a lot more appealing. But I like as we're looking at the draft, we didn't see that. We saw me took Salt Road Pack Beast.
Saw me took Salt Road Pack
Me
Beast
took,
is what
yeah.
you said.
We saw me take,
took.
yeah.
Me saw me took. Yeah, I hear that. I think I have cooled on Dispelling Exhale. I think we got some pushback because I was talking about last week of like the base blue or the base green decks, and they don't necessarily play well together. That has still sort of been, I think, a lot. Dispelling Exhale is a very powerful card, but I do think a lot of boxes have to be checked, and I like Enoch Wayfarer just doing the 2-drop, help me hit, or 2 mana play, helps me hit lands in the color of Disruptive Stormbrood, which is my best card so far. But I think that might be some that I just haven't quite figured out the Dispelling Exhale of it all. But I got burned a little bit week 1 by having decks where just the turns where you're like, I'm going to tap out instead of hold up Exhale because I have to. And then that's the turn I lose. I feel like Exhale puts me in some awkward spots. It's very powerful for sure.
Yeah. Well, and I think it gets better if you're on the Globe Dragons deck, for sure. Mm-hmm. Like, that is far and away its best home, is if you're in the Dragonstorm Globe Dragons deck. And I think, if we're talking just overarchingly to get away from this draft for a second, which is probably not great because we're taking a look at draft logs, but if we're talking about things you can read signals for, like, you can definitely read signals for, am I seeing Dragonstorms, Dragons, and Globe? And if you aren't seeing Dragons or the Dragonstorms in the first 6 or 7 picks, you should not be trying to draft the Globe Dragons Dragonstorm deck. Like, you need to have all of those pieces plus exhales for the deck to function.
That just like, I'm gonna say that seems really hard to come together. As someone who I haven't drafted that deck as like with all those things, those are like, you're talking about a lot of premium cards. The exhales are premium cards. A lot of the Omen Dragons are some of the better commons and certainly the better uncommons. Like, to check all those boxes, that's a lot. Plus you need the Globes plus the Dragonstorms.
It is a lot, but I mean, it's really good when it comes together. So I think that's a pre-conscribed deck where like it is paint by numbers. Like you just get the dragons, you get the globes, you get the Dragonstorms, you get the exhales. You rinse, repeat.
What order do you pick those things in?
It's tough. Like, I mean, bombs, and then you're probably taking globe ahead of exhales at this point because globe's such a key piece for the deck.
Okay.
And then the exhales. It's probably bombs, the white Dragonstorm, maybe the blue Dragonstorm, but probably not. Like the white Dragonstorm, then globe, then some of the other Dragonstorms, then the exhales. Because there is so much removal running around in the format. You don't need that much of it in this deck. Because you just need to time like 1 or 2 key pieces to really get to where your bombs and your dragons can take over. But that's a deck that you can read signals for. The aggro decks, like the red aggro decks, like if you're seeing the premium cards, you can definitely read signals for that. It's in the beatdown teamer space that stuff gets muddy to me as far as signals. And I think you really have to be flexible there with what style of deck you're drafting.
Okay.
But to get back to this draft, Pack 1, Pick 5, we've got Shocking Sharpshooter, Disruptive Stormbrood, Assault Road Pack Beast taking an error, I think, over a Dragonologist, and then an Enoch Wayfarer. Pack 1, Pick 5, you see the following cards as options. There's an Evolving Wilds. There's Shock Brigade, 1 in red for the 1/3 Menace, Mobilize 1. And then, like, Glacierwood Siege, although I'm pretty off this card. That's one blue
Yeah, I am
green
too.
for the rare that can mill people when you cast an instant or a sorcery. There's nothing else great to write home about here.
Does Riling Dawnbreaker toe any kind of line? That's the white omen dragon, and that like you could play it in Boros, you could play it in dragons.
Yeah, you could, but Shock Brigade is just so much better. Shock Brigade is nutter butters for the red beatdown decks.
Yeah,
Red aggro, red beatdown, whatever. Shock Brigade is a premium card in the format at 2 mana.
I agree completely. I just hate like. So, are you deciding now? Or you don't feel like you have to decide yet?
I don't have to decide yet. My rule is 6 picks in, then I'm taking stock, and I'm seeing what comes. Pick 7, 8, and on the wheel.
Okay, I'm excited to see what does come.
Pick 6. See the following cards as options after taking Shock Brigade there. There's a Jeskai Devotee, 1 in red for the 2/2 with Flurry, to give it +1/+1. There's Defibrillating Current, which is the Mardu 2-Brit uncommon to deal 4, and then you gain 2 life. There's also a Starry-Eyed Skyrider, 2 and a white for the 1/3 flyer. Whenever it attacks, another target creature you control gains flying, and attacking creatures you control have flying.
I guess Skyrider is the best card.
That's what I took. I think I like that card more than you. I could see a case for Jeskai Devotee. Again, similarly in this draft, Jeskai Devotee has gone up for me a lot from 4 or 5 days ago when I did this draft.
Well, it lets you do the thing. It lets you get deeper into red, which potentially lets you pivot a bit more later.
Yeah, I think today I would take Jeskai Devotee here. At the time, I felt with my view of the format, I felt fine with Starry-Eyed Skyrider. Mm-hmm. And then this is where we take stock. So we've got some aggro. We've got the Storm Brood. We haven't seen dragons. We're not seeing premium dragons, really. We've seen no globes. So to me, I'm out on the dragon's life at this point, and I'm trying to build beatdown. Pick 7, I take a Jeskai Devotee. Pick 8, get a frontline rush. And that solidifies it for me. I mean, that's like deal, locking in, okay, I'm going to be red-white aggro.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I would have just navigated this draft very differently.
So let's quickly run down it, because I'm curious what your route would be and how happy you feel.
So the only thing that I would feel unhappy about is the pick 8 frontline rush would make me feel a little about it. But okay, so my draft would go Disruptive Stormbrood 1 into Sultai Monument 2, let's say Dragonologist 3, Enoch Wayfarer 4, probably I think I would take Evolving Wilds pick 5. I'm not.
You're also well set up to take a Stalwart Successor pick 5.
I guess I could just take Stalwart Successor because I'm base black green at this point, or I guess I'm base green.
But would you?
At this point?
Yeah.
But would I? I don't know. I don't hate taking Evolving Wilds here. It's Wilds versus Successor. I think. Let's say I take Wilds.
Okay.
Pick 6. Sad. I guess take Crotic Nest Guard, whatever. This pick I feel sad. Pick 7 I feel great about Wayfarer. Pick 8 I take a sad Roamer's Routine, passing Frontline Rush. But then pick 9 I get a Wayfarer, into pick 10 Snakeskin Veil, into whatever, pick 11 Leopard. Like I'm not.
So do you not feel panicked at this point? Because I do if I'm you. Your best card is Disruptive Stormbrood, and you have no late game in a deck that has been set up to play for the late game. Like, what's your plan from there? Because I feel bad if I'm you.
I know you do, but I don't. I just feel like I've got, because there's boxes I need to check in these decks, and sure, the boxes you're worried about is the late game, which I just feel like I'm gonna get, but I'm set up to take basically any good card I see that doesn't have to be in the colors I am, because I've got whatever 2 Wayfarers plus Monument plus Evolving Wilds, and just take whatever good stuff I have, and then I know I'm going to hit my land drops because of the Wayfarers and the Monument. I don't feel panicked. I feel happy about where I'm at. Like, yeah, I see the Frontline Rush pick 8. I don't love passing that, but I'm just not putting myself in the position to take that because of what happens pick 2.
Sure. And that's the cost of doing business with how you're approaching drafting the format.
For sure.
So can I sell you on the fact that if you are more flexible with your draft strategy, that this seat is an aggro seat?
I don't think so.
You don't think so? I
just don't think it works that way, because like I think we both end up. I mean, I know you're not happy with the pile of cards that I end up with, but I'm also,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I see your pile and I go, yeah, that's fine, but I just know I don't want to draft that deck if I don't have
Yeah,
to.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
feel like I have to in this seat.
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
so you could, like, I think, and that illustrates, like, you could go the whole format if you want. I think not playing aggro, I would say you're giving up equity, but it sounds like you think you're not.
I don't know. My win rate would beg to differ
I'm
currently.
sure your win rate is better than mine. I've been getting hammered,
But
but I think some of that is figuring out all of this and figuring out all the nuances of, like, you've gotten the win rate benefit of specializing, which I think this format does
yes,
reward you for doing, because you get a lot of the intricate knowledge about making the hard decisions because you're faced with the same kinds of hard decisions.
I will say I have thought about this week. Like, man, I just feel like I know what I want to do, and I feel confident in doing it, and I feel like I know how to backdoor, and maybe we'll get some. We'll try and find some drafts. I've been drafting. I was out of town this week, so I was drafting exclusively on my phone, basically. But like, get some draft logs where I have to pivot, or where I feel forced out of my cozy nook of late game soup, which has definitely happened a fair amount. I've ended up in. I had like a weird base black little bit of red Mardu deck. I had a blue green beatdown deck. Like, I had that mono red deck I talked to you about. Like, it's not like I end up in this deck a lot. The thing I will say that I've thought about is, like, what happens if I'm at day 2 of the arena open and I'm like, this is what I know how to do, and then it's like, yeah, but Boros is open, and then I'm gonna go, well, I have no pick order for Boros past like what. Like, I know what hooks me into the deck, but then I don't know the nuances of that deck at all, like,
Sure.
so I do think in that sense I'm leaving equity on the table, but
Yeah.
like, but
That's
I'm
how I
also,
feel. I feel
yeah,
like I've lost a lot, but that I understand more about more of a variety of decks.
yeah, I believe
Because
that for
we're,
sure.
but like, what if you're somebody who only gets to draft this format like 5 times or 10 times? Really, you know
I
what I
would
mean?
say
Like,
what,
if you listen to our podcast and you're drafting a format 5 times or 10 times, this format is so hard. Like,
yes.
I feel like you're just gonna get smacked around.
Well, we've
You
seen
know?
that. I feel like I've seen so many testimonials in the Discord of people being like, I'm getting hammered in this format. Like, my win rate was great in Ether Drift, and I don't know what's happening here. And I think, like, to those people, to the people out there who want, if you're struggling, and if you only get to draft a format 5 or 10 times, my first question to you is, what do you want to do?
Yes.
Like, what
I think
kind
that's a
of deck
great first question.
do you want to draft? And then you would tell me, and I would say, cool, these are the things that are important to that deck. And this is how I would approach drafting that style of deck.
Yeah, and I think I think, yeah, the more drafts you're going to do, I think the more you want to branch out. But like, I would actually honestly recommend, if you're going to do 5 to 15 drafts, pick one deck and then one deck that you think you can off ramp into, and
Mm-hmm.
try to figure out those two things or something, because I do think you can draft the format that way to a certain extent without giving up too much equity. Like, you're a testament to that, right? Like,
Yeah.
you're winning way more than me drafting basically 2 decks. Is that fair?
Yeah. Basically going for like late game soup, off ramp into beatdown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've been bopping around a lot more with just decks that are bad, like not good archetypes in the format, and then also some of the pillars of the format.
It's weird because we should wrap up here, but I don't know how I feel about it. Like, I think you're out on the format largely.
I think I'm out because but it's really unique. Like, that's the thing I
Yeah.
keep coming back to. Like, as a content creator, I feel like we've struggled with how to, and some of that's been due to poor performance on my part in the format, but like, it's difficult to, like, it's simultaneously very easy to distill down, like, into, well, draft late game or draft Mardu. Like, it's very easy to distill down into that, but then, like, to get any more nuance is very difficult to distill it down further past that. But I think that's also, I think framing it as, well, aggro versus late game soup is reductive. Like, I think there
Yes.
is a lot more. Like, I think the format's simultaneously really deep, and also, like, I just don't particularly care for what it's asking of you personally. Like,
Yeah.
I much more want to read draft signals and feel like I got rewarded for reading signals into a pre-prescribed thing, as opposed to painting my own picture. And I think this format really asks you to paint your own picture.
Yeah. I agree.
So on that note, lots of musings there. Hopefully that's some food for thought for you if you've been struggling in the format. And I think a great place to wrap us up. Thank you, as always, to Salty Pretzels for our intro and outro music. Make sure you give it a listen.
You can find all of our content on our website, lordsoflimited.com. We've got our tier list up there, which this may be the format where that is the least useful piece of information out there, just because, oh, no?
I don't know, because you do need to know which cards are good. I mean,
Yeah.
I have not updated it since week 1, so I'll get on that if we're gonna send people there.
Great advertisement. Check out our tier list, which may or may not be updated. You could find our Twitch streams, respectively, our YouTube channel, where you can find the episode as well, our merch, courtesy of TeePublic, and our episode backlog, all available at lordsoflimited.com.
If you've got any feedback about the show or any questions, shoot us an email at lordsoflimited@gmail.com.
Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you next week for another episode of Lords of Limited.
Thanks, everybody. See you later.